It all began as a casual exchange of glances in the teacher's lounge, a light workout in the school gym. But every touch, every lingering look, carried something deeper beneath the surface. He didn't offer compliments. He didn't ask. He simply was. And at some point, that quiet presence was enough to set everything in motion. Feelings, decisions, vows. Meanwhile, her husband sat in silence at the kitchen table, slowly digesting the stillness of a marriage coming apart at the seams. His world wasn't falling apart because of shouting, but because of the silence, because of the gaze that no longer lingered. While one man built an illusion, the other stood at the edge of a cliff, literally. One coincidence, one forgotten book, one comment from a teenager, and the entire fragile architecture of their life could have collapsed. But what if that was the moment when true salvation actually began? What if love isn't a feeling at all, but a choice you have to make again and again, even when you're nearly out of strength? Do they have the courage to walk that path? Hello, my dear friend. Before you start watching this video, I have a small request. Check the description and subscribe to my friend's channel. He'll really appreciate it. Now, let's get started. After earning his finance degree, Ryan landed a job at the Washington Mutual branch in town, a bank thriving during the early 2000s housing boom. The mortgage business was booming. On some weeks, Ryan processed more than a dozen home loan applications, in addition to a steady flow of second mortgages and home equity lines of credit. It seemed like nearly everyone was either purchasing real estate or leveraging their home's value to buy things they had once considered out of reach. Boats, new cars, even backyard swimming pools. Everyday people were living large, and Ryan took pride in his work. He was bringing in a good income while helping families upgrade their lifestyles. About a year after finishing college, Ryan met Sophie Warren. It was a sun-drenched Saturday, warm with a slight breeze. He was cleaning up the batting order in his weekend baseball league when he noticed a beautiful brunette watching from the bleachers. She wore a fitted top, her long legs stretched out beneath summer shorts, seated next to the wife of one of Ryan's teammates. After the final inning, Jordan and his wife Julia introduced her. Her name was Sophie. The four of them headed to a local bar for a drink. Once inside, Jordan and Julia drifted toward another couple at the bar, leaving Ryan and Sophie at a small table by themselves. A brief silence hung between them, before Sophie broke it with a playful remark. "So, is this try number 3?" she asked, her tone teasing, eyes glinting with amusement. Ryan laughed. "They've stopped even pretending to be slick about it, but hey, I'm not exactly complaining." She tilted her head and smirked. "You, huh? Well, already better than the last one. That guy wouldn't shut up about himself." Raising his glass, Ryan replied, "Guess he thought bragging was the way to your heart." "Bad strategy," she said with a grin. "You, though, are you going for the humble approach?" "Only if it's working," he said with a smile. Sophie blushed slightly and gave a nervous laugh. "Wow, sorry. That came out awkward. I'm a little jittery." "Jittery? What for?" Ryan asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated before answering. "Julia pointed you out during the game and told me we'd be hanging out. It made me nervous." Ryan looked at her closely. She was undeniably stunning, but didn't carry herself like someone used to hearing that. "Seriously? You're beautiful. That's not nerves-worthy?" This time Ryan felt himself go red. "Oh no," Sophie teased. "Are we just going to spend the night tossing compliments back and forth?" Just then, Jordan and Julia returned. Julia gave them a cautious glance, clearly bracing for another unsuccessful setup. "What's happening here?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Jordan sighed. "Told you, matchmaker duty's risky." Before the conversation could go further, Sophie chimed in, smiling. "Perfect timing. We were just about to rate each other's pickup lines." Julia gave Sophie a look and said, "Come with me." She grabbed her hand. "Bathroom." As they disappeared toward the back, Ryan looked at Jordan, confused. Bathroom? Jordan gave a knowing shrug. Dude, just let it go. I stopped questioning that stuff years ago. Ryan signaled the waitress for another round and leaned in toward Jordan. I like her. She's smart, quick. Those eyes. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Julia's going to be thrilled. Her success rate on setups? Let's say it varies. So what's the story? Ryan asked. Why she's still single? Jordan leaned back. Same reason you are. Too many flakes out there. Not enough people who are worth a damn. Ryan nodded. Well, you clearly found someone solid. Jordan smiled. She keeps me on my toes, sure. But yeah, I got lucky. And from where I'm sitting, you're off to a promising start. He nodded in the direction of the bathrooms. You two clicked. The women came back just then, both laughing. Sophie slid her chair a little closer to Ryan. That one small move said it all. They stayed at the bar for hours, sharing drinks, jokes, and stories. That night marked the beginning of something real. Ryan and Sophie became a couple. She taught high school English and spent her summers enrolled in graduate courses. Ryan was clocking 50-plus hours each week at the bank, often staying late. But no matter what, they carved out time for one another. Weeknights, weekends, whatever was necessary, they made it work. Their relationship grew strong over time. Like any meaningful love story, it had its hurdles. The biggest? Sophie's father, Clark Warren. A stern, career military man with little patience for anyone who hadn't worn a uniform. Ryan thought about how to explain his decision not to join the army, but eventually realized that it wouldn't change anything. The colonel had already assessed him as another lazy civilian. Fortunately, Sophie did not share her father's black-and-white worldview. At least for now, the colonel kept his opinions to himself. As for intimacy, their connection was not instantaneous. It took time. They gradually got to know each other, but what they had in common was sincere, based not only on superficial attraction. They connected on deeper values and goals, often spending evenings discussing their future. 2 kids or 3? Raise them Catholic or maybe Methodist? The exact details were fluid. What mattered to them was raising kind, thoughtful humans in an unpredictable world, instilling empathy, structure, and a strong moral compass. 6 months after their first date, and 5 months into a committed relationship, Ryan proposed. Sophie said yes without hesitation. Just 4 months later, they were married and flying off to Jamaica for their honeymoon. Ryan never shared this with anyone, but the moment that stood out most from that trip came one sunny morning. While lying on a busy beach, Sophie glanced around, noticed a few other women sunbathing topless, and, feeling adventurous, slipped off her bikini top. Ryan's jaw nearly hit the sand. His over-the-top reaction, frozen, slack-jawed, sent Sophie into peals of laughter. That trip felt surreal. Days of sun and surf, tropical drinks, and steamy nights. Ryan spent the entire vacation marveling at how someone like her had chosen someone like him. One lazy afternoon, while floating side by side in the calm turquoise water, he caught her gaze, eyes the same hue as the sea. In that instant, everything clicked. He imagined a future of gray hair, sore joints, and wrinkled hands, none of it scary, as long as she kept looking at him that way. Later that night, watching her step out of her sundress in their hotel room, he felt certain he had somehow won the grand prize of life. Before Ryan, Sophie hadn't had much experience with men, just 2 relationships, neither of which had left a lasting impression. She'd made it through high school and much of college without crossing that threshold. Those previous encounters were awkward and disconnected, but Ryan was different. He noticed things. He made her feel truly understood. When they returned home from the honeymoon, they were full of plans, practical ones. Not starry-eyed, but hopeful. They wanted to build something solid, with eyes open to reality. Looking back, it's easy to say they were overly confident. But if the experts, Congress, Wall Street, the Fed didn't see the crash coming. How could two optimistic newlyweds? It was early 2007, and housing prices were skyrocketing. Like countless others, Ryan and Sophie got swept up. Renting felt wasteful, so they bought their first place, a modest three-bedroom duplex. The problem? That house had been worth $2,000 not long before, but after a brutal bidding war, they paid $42,000. Their realtor insisted it was a bargain. Not long after they signed the papers, Sophie came to Ryan with an idea. What if she took a year off work, completed her master's degree, and they tried for a baby? That way, she could be home during those crucial early months, then return to work better qualified, and ideally, better paid. They ran the numbers, planned for emergencies. Ryan had just landed a raise and a substantial bonus. On paper, it worked. Everything seemed to align. Then, in November, Sophie told him she was late. 3 weeks. She'd already taken a test. It was positive. A July due date. The timing felt perfect. A baby and a career milestone on the same horizon. It felt like destiny was giving them a green light. But life rarely unfolds so neatly. By April 2008, the housing market was unraveling. Washington Mutual, Ryan's employer, began closing branches and laying off staff in droves. Ryan was let go. It took 5 brutal months before he found another job, this time managing inventory at a discount store. The new position came with half the salary, unpredictable hours, and scattered days off. It wasn't what either of them had envisioned. Then, on May 15th, Sophie went into labor, 7 weeks too early. Their daughter Ava was born tiny and vulnerable, spending 3 tense weeks in the NICU. Medical bills piled up fast. Ryan's temporary insurance covered part of it, but it was nothing compared to the benefits he'd had before. Sophie pushed through and finished her degree anyway. She landed a teaching job at the local high school, which gave her 10 weeks at home with Ava before the school year began. Her mom helped with childcare, and Ryan adjusted to pre-dawn shifts. They were both working, but it never felt like enough. Their house was now worth far less than they owed. Selling wasn't even an option. And Ava was a difficult baby. Constant crying, recurring ear infections, sleepless nights. No one in the house was getting rest. The stress wore them down. Physical intimacy faded away. Ryan's erratic schedule clashed with Sophie's, leaving them more like tired co-tenants than lovers. The couple that used to share long talks and lazy evenings now barely crossed paths. And as Sophie entered her second year teaching, the cracks between them only widened. That's when Kevin Trask showed up. The freshly recruited gym coach made a splash the minute he crossed the threshold. Standing a commanding 6'3", built like someone who'd been sculpted in a college football dream, and sporting tousled blonde hair with just the right amount of scruff, he looked like he had stepped out of a fitness commercial. Nobody overlooked his arrival, least of all the seasoned teachers who exchanged murmurs about him after the staff introduction. And just like that, something shifted. It was the middle of August, 2 weeks shy of the students' return, and the school was alive with that subtle buzz only teachers recognize. The soft churn of printers filled the halls, mingling with the chemical tang of whiteboard cleaner and the scattered evidence of coffee left half-finished on desks. Classrooms were in a state of transition, more cluttered than prepped, resembling weekend flea markets rather than sites of structured learning. Faculty wandered in outfits better suited for an easygoing brunch than a professional setting, embracing the waning warmth of late summer. Sophie had chosen her outfit with that same mood in mind. Smart, casual khaki shorts that hinted at the effort she'd put into staying active during the break. Her legs, bronzed and lean from morning jogs and stroller walks with baby Ava. She wore a breezy, sleeveless white blouse with faint pinstripes, just open enough at the neckline to suggest a curve if she leaned forward. Tasteful, not provocative, but enough to remind herself she hadn't disappeared into motherhood. After endless nights of broken sleep and months wrestling with fading self-assurance and postpartum fog, Sophie was finally starting to feel solid again, more like the woman she used to be, steady, capable, maybe even desirable. So when her eyes landed on the tall figure at the back of the room, easygoing, expansive, and entirely self-possessed, something stirred inside her for the first time in what felt like ages. Kevin had presence, that was certain. From the moment she walked through the door, she knew he saw her. He didn't glance away. He didn't pretend. Instead, he leaned against the wall, arms crossed, the picture of quiet confidence, like someone who didn't need to chase attention because it came to him naturally. His gaze was steady but never crass. He saw her, the strength in her stride, the lines of her form, even the ring on her finger. And rather than flinch at the sign of commitment, he seemed more intrigued because of it. Kevin preferred women with wedding bands. Less mess, fewer strings, no long talks about the future. They had their own homes, their own responsibilities. He liked being the side note, the thing in between. So from that very first moment, he began his slow, calculated move into Sophie's day-to-day. He didn't push, no flattery, no awkward DMs, no pickup lines, just quiet consistency. Turning up at the copier, sharing space in the staff lounge, taking casual walks through the hallways. Unassuming, deliberate. By then, whispers had started to spread. No one knew who started them, but nearly everyone had heard some variation of the story. Kevin had a past in the military. Special forces, some said. Navy SEAL, Army Ranger. A few murmured about covert operations overseas. The details shifted with each retelling, but the myth stuck. He looked the part, fit, composed, with that air of someone who's seen things. Kevin never confirmed or corrected the stories. He'd offer a faint smile, maybe a shrug, and smoothly change the subject. The less he shared, the more captivating he became. People are drawn to puzzles, especially ones that don't beg to be solved. The truth? Kevin had spent 3 dull years in the Navy stationed at a supply center in Kansas. No battlefield, no combat tales, just counting shipments and logging inventory. He hated nearly every second of it, but it granted him gym access, and in that gym, he built himself into someone who looked like he'd survived wars. Not exactly heroic, but it gave him the look people wanted to see, and he had no qualms letting that illusion carry weight. By the close of week 2, scheduling serendipity, or perhaps a fortunate clerical slip, had landed Kevin and Sophie with the same free period right before lunch. 30 uninterrupted minutes, no supervision, no obligations, just silence and each other. Kevin used it wisely. "You hit the gym?" he asked one morning, sweat trailing down his neck after his run. "Here and there," Sophie replied, taking a sip of her iced coffee. "Not as regularly as I used to." He gave her a relaxed smile. "It's dead on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I usually have the place to myself. If you're thinking of getting back into it, we could keep it casual. No expectations. Way better than sharing space with that guy who yells lifting baby weights like he's in a strongman contest." She chuckled. She had missed working out, but she hated crowded gyms. The idea of getting back into shape quietly with just him around felt oddly inviting. "Okay," she said. "Tuesdays and Thursdays it is." And just like that, a rhythm settled into place. Twice a week, they met in the gym. She'd swap her work clothes for leggings and a tank, pull her hair into a ponytail, and step into those workouts like they were a kind of release. They moved around kettlebells, took turns spotting planks and lunges, always within bounds, yet something unspoken hummed between them. Touches that lingered, glances that held, laughter that rolled on longer than needed. Then, one February afternoon, Kevin broke the pattern. "Hey," he said, tossing her a chilled water bottle. "Been working on something, off the record." She arched a brow. "Oh yeah?" "I've been writing," he said casually. "A novel, just wrapped the first draft. Thought maybe you'd want to give it a read. Tell me what's working, and what isn't." Sophie's brows lifted, surprised but intrigued. As an English teacher, critiquing was second nature. Still, curiosity lit in her eyes. "I had no idea you wrote," she said. Kevin offered a casual shrug. "Yeah, most people don't." "So, what's it about?" she asked. He smirked slowly, his expression unreadable. "War, mostly. But I'd rather let you dive in blind, no spoilers." Sophie nodded. "All right, bring it by tomorrow." That night, after Ryan had left for his overnight shift at the store and Ava was finally down for the night, Sophie poured herself a chilled glass of Sauvignon Blanc, wrapped a blanket over her legs, and sank into the couch. She retrieved the manuscript. Through Sand and Fire was the title. The main character? A Navy SEAL named Tristan, grim, emotionally scarred, and undeniably resilient. His history was weighed down by heartbreak and past horrors. The story carried a raw, unfiltered quality, unrefined but searing with emotional intensity. Sophie couldn't help but annotate as she read, jotting notes in the margins, circling standout phrases, underlining lines that made her pause. Halfway through, she hesitated. Was Tristan supposed to be Kevin? Even the name sounded like a hybrid, Kevin and Trask, somehow spliced together. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. It felt deliberate. She couldn't ignore it. The next evening unfolded the same. Ryan away, Ava asleep. Sophie picked up where she left off. In the latter half, Tristan was on leave, wandering Italy for a few weeks. That's when the tone shifted. War gave way to dream. On the Amalfi Coast, Tristan and another SEAL, Gavin, met two French tourists, Mira and Liana. They drank on seaside terraces, danced under foreign stars, spent long hours sunbathing on a private yacht. The scenes glowed with vibrant energy, almost too vivid. Sophie's heartbeat quickened. She was no longer just an observer. She was there, on the boat, in the surf, watching Mira unfasten her bikini top, feeling Tristan's hands wrap around her waist as he hoisted her from the ocean like she weighed nothing. Her pen slid from her fingers. Absent-mindedly, her hand drifted beneath the waistband of her pajama pants. The writing didn't over-explain. It flirted with restraint, yet never felt coy. Mira was described in exacting detail. 5'7", lean but shapely, sun-drenched brunette hair slicked back, piercing blue eyes hidden behind aviators. Tristan wasn't predatory. He gazed at her like a man rediscovering beauty after a long absence. They swam. They kissed. Then, wordlessly, they disappeared below deck. A smooth fade to black. Sophie wrestled with the love scenes. Some felt over the top, even slightly awkward. But perhaps that was intentional. Deliberate exaggeration, sensual and unashamed. She didn't typically read this kind of material, so who was she to judge? Still, it had blindsided her. One scene lingered in her mind. Tristan and Mira, laughing like teenagers, kissed as seawater dripped from their skin. Mira tipped backward too far and tumbled into the waves with a splash. Without pause, Tristan dove after her, grinning. They climbed back up, soaked and laughing, only to find Gavin and Liana standing nude at the rail. Sophie blinked, surprised, but kept turning the pages. Liana, unfazed, took Mira below for a hushed conversation. Meanwhile, Tristan and Gavin, both naked now too, exchanged uncertain glances. When Mira reappeared, she wore a mischievous grin. "We thought you might want to spend your leave with us," she said. "The whole time. On the boat. We can swing by the dock to get your things, then cruise the Mediterranean. What do you think?" Gavin turned to Tristan. Tristan met his eyes. No hesitation. "In a heartbeat," they said together. That was the start of the most indulgent, hedonistic stretch of time these fictional warriors would ever experience. Sophie flipped to the next page. The narrative only intensified from there. The escapism deepened, more sensual, more elaborate, erotic, yet never crude. At times theatrical, but it pulled Sophie in until she didn't want to stop. and something shifted in her. Each time she read Mira, she found her mind replacing it with her own name. She wasn't just following the story anymore. She was in it. On that yacht. Beneath Tristan's fingers, hearing her name fall from his lips. When she reached the scene where they made love beneath a starlit sky, bodies bare, skin still tasting of the sea, constellations spinning overhead, she paused. The manuscript slipped from her hands and landed on the bedspread. She shut her eyes. All she could picture was Kevin, his low voice, that crooked grin, the roughness of his fingertips, the quiet intensity in his stare. She imagined him as Tristan, pressing his mouth to hers, tracing the curve of her hip. This time, she didn't try to push the thoughts away. She didn't dismiss it as mere fiction. Her breath stayed uneven for a long while, and her trembling took even longer to fade. 2 days later, she came back with the manuscript, now marked with her comments. Her face flushed the moment she walked into the gym, and she handed the folder over without meeting his eyes. Kevin knew what it was instantly. The story had landed exactly as he'd intended. She looked unsettled, visibly tense, her lips tight like she was afraid to say the wrong thing. "You finished it?" he asked, grinning. Sophie gave a subtle nod, her eyes flicking up just briefly. "Yeah. It's strong, especially for the first option. I made a few comments, but not very many. Only minor details. Although maybe I went a little overboard with the intimacy scene." Kevin Shockley. "You didn't like that part?" Her cheeks darkened even more. "It's not that. It actually worked. Maybe too well." "Caught you off guard?" he said, stepping a little closer and lowering his voice. "I've always believed that when two characters really connect, it brings fire, tension, something that feels alive. Sometimes it even transforms them." The way he said it left no room for misinterpretation. He wasn't just talking about the story anymore. The meaning hit her hard. He was making a declaration, not just about the characters, but about them. And though she resisted acknowledging it, something stirred deep inside her, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt visible, wanted. Any doubt about Kevin's intentions vanished in that instant. His eyes weren't asking, they were stating. If she hadn't been married, she would have already been in his bed. And later that night, lying next to Ryan as he snored beside her, Sophie found herself facing questions she'd avoided for years. Why did I settle so young? Was Ryan ever truly the one? What had Ryan really achieved? Why did he suddenly feel so small compared to Kevin? Kevin was bold, unfiltered, completely unapologetic about what he wanted. Ryan, in contrast, had grown tired, hesitant, always seeking approval. Kevin didn't ask for anything. He decided. And with time, Sophie's image of Ryan began to shift. Their conversations shrank into short, logistical exchanges. Diapers, errands, appointments. The intimacy faded. Their shared world dissolved into routine. At home, their marriage quietly began to decay, while something between Sophie and Kevin quietly gained momentum at school. What began as casual banter soon turned into something else. Daphne Monroe saw it. A sharp-tongued biology teacher who lived next to Kevin, she'd had a brief fling with him earlier that year. It didn't last long, just a few weeks, but it had mattered to her. Then Kevin cut her off, abruptly, right when Sophie started spending time with him. Daphne wasn't just irritated, she was humiliated, dumped and sidelined for the school's newest golden girl. The wound only deepened when Sophie was named coach of the girls' tennis team that spring. Daphne had the experience, she had the credentials, she'd even helped shape the school's athletic policies. But the job went to Sophie, perfect teeth, lean frame, bright blue eyes. Kevin's first mistake was mixing work with his personal life. His second was thinking Daphne would let it go. His third, and most dangerous, was forgetting who she was connected to. Daphne's uncle was a sitting congressman, and he had ways of getting information. All it took was a quiet call to Uncle Franklin, and Daphne had what she needed. Kevin Trask, the school's enigmatic, larger-than-life figure, wasn't a decorated military operator. He'd worked behind a desk on a naval base. No deployments, no combat, no commendations. Just polished stories and a chiseled body. But Daphne didn't strike right away. She waited. She watched. She let the attraction between Kevin and Sophie simmer, knowing exactly where it was headed. She was patient, deliberate. She would wait until the line was crossed. Then, she'd bring the whole thing down. 6 weeks after Sophie returned his manuscript, Kevin dropped the act. It was a Thursday. He caught her alone in the gym, his voice calm but firm. "You've been dancing around this long enough," he said. "I made a reservation. Carmen's, Thursday evening." She looked stunned. "That's my book club night." "I know," Kevin said smoothly. "I checked your planner. Carmen's at 7. Afterward, we walked to the Hilton across the street." Her heartbeat surged. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a plan. Kevin leaned in, his eyes steady and unblinking. "I want to give you something real, something you've been missing." Sophie didn't protest. She didn't try to resist. All she could think about was how certain he was, how deliberate, how unlike Ryan. Ryan, who always hesitated. Kevin never did. He took action, and she had just one question. "Why the Hilton?" she whispered. "Why not your place?" Kevin's voice slipped against her ear, warm and close. "3 teachers live in my complex," she whispered back. "I'm not ready for an audience watching me sneak out at dawn." "You're still tied to that loser," he muttered. The word, loser, landed like a slap, but she didn't flinch. Instead, Sophie gave a sly grin. In his twisted, careless way, Kevin was offering something like empathy. The urge to defend Ryan didn't even stir. There was no loyalty left to summon. She let the comment pass. Kevin's grin stretched as she sauntered away, her stride deliberately slow, her hips swaying like punctuation. He recognized the performance. He'd seen it, fed it, perfected it. He gave just enough illusion to keep things interesting. But there was no meaning behind it. No commitment. Just another fleeting chapter in a book he'd never finish. Soon, Sophie Whitman would be nothing more than a name he forgot to forget. She was already late. Her tennis team was warming up on the courts, waiting on her whistle. But her head spun, wired on adrenaline, laced with guilt, and shadowed by something disturbingly close to thrill. She didn't agonize, she acted, quick and clean, like ripping a bandage. "It's a date," she typed and sent it. Kevin didn't answer. Thursday morning came like all the others. Sophie and Ryan stood shoulder to shoulder in the kitchen, coffee mugs in hand. The silence between them was old, but it pressed heavier today. Ava, perched in her booster seat, was a hurricane of joy, giggling, slapping soggy Cheerios into a paste, flinging them like confetti. Sophie took a deep sip, already rehearsing the lines she'd memorized. "Ryan," she said, her voice calm, calculated. "I've got book club after practice. You'll need to pick Ava up from Mom's before 6. Feed her, keep her entertained. I won't be back until 10. He nodded without looking up. "Okay, what book are you dissecting tonight?" The question stalled her. She blinked, delayed, then raised her cup again for cover. "Water for Elephants." Her tone was smooth, but not quite natural. Ryan studied her a second, brow arching slightly. "Just curious, trying to stay in the loop." His words were soft, but thin. The comment hit, not hard, but with precision. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. He wasn't angry, just dulled. A man scraping the last reserves of concern. He grabbed his lunch, kissed Ava's head on autopilot, and left without saying goodbye. Sophie stayed rooted as the door shut behind him, frustration prickling in her chest. That was it? No goodbye? But then something colder crept in. When did I last say anything kind to him? She couldn't recall. Right before the first bell, Kevin leaned into her classroom doorway like it was his. That familiar smirk locked in place. His eyes swept the room before his voice dropped to a confidential purr. 6 o'clock at Carmen's, room at the Hilton across the street. Don't be late. We've got catching up to do. Just us. I have to be home by 10, she teased, but tension edged her words. Kevin chuckled. Nice try. I want dinner. I want wine. I want you. No clocks, no interruptions. Then dessert. Wine and no toddler, she murmured, half to herself. You're reckless. Her smile was all show, convincing, but hollow. Now go, before someone walks in. She held it together, barely. The hours dragged. She taught. She coached. She smiled like routine hadn't shattered. Practice wrapped early under the pretense of errands. The truth, she needed the locker room emptied. Alone, she unzipped her bag. Inside lay the dress, black, sleek, understated elegance, the same one from New Year's Eve at the Crystal Room, back when Ryan made reservations, when they still tried, when nerves still fluttered like wings. She stepped into it like it remembered her, molding perfectly to her frame, maybe even better now. She slid on sheer stockings, thigh-high. The heels, 4-inch stilettos buried in the back of the closet, completed the look. Her hair was pulled into a taut ponytail. No time to wash, only to control. Precision over spontaneity. She gave herself one last look, the silhouette, the poise, the armor. He won't know what hit him, she thought. Then, softer, I earned this. She packed her school clothes into a small overnight bag, planning to freshen up at the Hilton before returning home. Every move had been plotted, every detail tucked beneath layers of routine and denial. She secured the gym doors and stepped into the crisp dusk air, the clack of heels echoing sharply. She was almost at her car when the crunch of gravel made her freeze. A blue Honda rolled into the lot. Her stomach dropped. Alexa Morales stepped out from the driver's seat, her senior, her team captain. Mrs. Whitman, hold up! Alexa called out, jogging to catch her. Thank God you're still here. I left my ethics book and all my notes in my locker. I've got a quiz tomorrow. Could you let me in real quick? Sophie's stomach tightened, guilt sweeping over her like a cold gust. It felt like being caught in the act, exposed, vulnerable. Of course, she replied, masking the tension in her voice. Let's go get it unlocked. Alexa chatted easily beside her as they walked to the locker room. You're looking extra fancy tonight, Mrs. Whitman. Got something special planned? Anniversary or maybe a hot date? Sophie forced a small smile. Something like that, she answered, skirting the real reason behind her attire. My parents used to dress up for date nights too, Alexa continued breezily. When I was younger, I couldn't stand it. Mom would wear these skimpy dresses, and Dad would show up all formal in a jacket. They'd come back acting all lovey-dovey, and I'd just roll my eyes and gag. Sophie chuckled softly, trying to maintain composure. But honestly, I kind of admire it now, Alexa went on. Over 20 years together, and they still act like they just met. I think that's pretty amazing. Sophie stayed silent while Alexa retrieved her things from the locker. They exited together, and just as Alexa was about to climb into her car, she glanced back with a teasing grin. Have a fun night, Mrs. Whitman. I've seen your husband around. He's a good-looking guy. She winked. Seems like you've got it all. With that, she got in and drove off, her taillights fading into the dark. Sophie stood beside her own car, one hand on the door handle, unmoving. Her heart pounded violently, and then, like a dam breaking, it all hit her. Guilt, remorse, a deep, sickening awareness of what she was about to do. She slid into the driver's seat and crumbled. The sobs tore out of her, raw and unstoppable. Between choked breaths, she whispered fragments into the silence. What am I doing? How did I let it get this far? I thought I deserved this. Deserved what? Exactly? The right to unravel her family? Tears streamed down her cheeks, dragging her makeup with them. Her body shook, and her dress clung damply to her skin. It took 10 agonizing minutes to collect herself, to piece together enough strength to move. She didn't fix her hair. She didn't bother wiping the mascara off her face. She turned the key in the ignition, backed out of the lot, and drove, not toward the restaurant, not to the hotel, but back to her house. She didn't care about looking composed anymore. She just needed her daughter's arms around her. She needed the warmth of the man she had nearly walked away from. Ryan had spent the whole day dragging his feet, wrapped in a dull, unshakable fog. Everything felt heavy now. The spark was gone, buried under routine, frustration, and silence. He missed the closeness he used to have with Sophie. For the past 2 years, he'd kept it together mostly for Ava's sake. He owed her that much. But lately, Sophie couldn't even look him in the eye. Whatever love they'd shared felt distant, disconnected. That afternoon, he clocked out earlier than usual. "Screw it," he muttered, briefly considering a stop at the bar before picking up Ava from her mom's. Instead, he headed home, chasing a moment of solitude. He'd regret it. Pulling mail from the box, he flipped through the envelopes. A couple were stamped with bold red past due warnings. He ripped them open right there on the sidewalk and felt his stomach turn. Once inside, he dropped into a chair at the kitchen table and laid the bills out. $1,500. That's what he needed, just to keep them afloat for another month. But from where? He passed the fridge, ignoring the cheap beer inside, and reached for the cabinet above the stove, where the good bourbon lived, usually saved for when Sophie's father visited. He poured a shot. It burned, but not nearly enough. He poured another. He had rehearsed this in his head for months. He understood the logic. The pieces had long been falling into place. But the timing? That was always the missing piece. Until now. Why now? Because deep down, he believed they might be better off without him. The insurance money could give Sophie and Ava a reset, freedom from the weight he felt he had become. They were suffocating. So was he. And the other truth? He was just tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing tired. Disappointment had eroded everything inside him. Every day felt like pushing a boulder up a hill, only to watch it tumble back down again. When Sophie was by his side, her laughter, her touch, it had all felt manageable. But for the past 6 months, he'd been pushing it alone. As for how he'd go, he didn't want it to look like surrender. It didn't need to seem like a cry for help. 2 things made it unbearable. First was the nauseating idea that one day Ava might grow up and discover her father had ended his own life. The second was more practical. If the death didn't qualify as suicide, the insurance payout would be twice as much. The answer had always been there, hiding in plain sight. Each day, on his commute to and from downtown, Ryan passed a stretch of road everyone in town called Suicide Curve. That bend had gained its grim moniker after 2 cars had plunged into the ravine below on separate occasions. It was a dangerous kink in the worn-out highway connecting their sleepy suburb to the urban sprawl. Years ago, the city had constructed a bypass because the curve couldn't be made safe. There had even been serious talk of closing it down for good, but the public outcry was immediate. The new route added 12 minutes to daily drives, a price most weren't willing to pay. So the city compromised: keep the road open, install a weak guardrail, and lower the speed limit to 15. All that was left was to pick the right moment. After his second swig of bourbon, Ryan made up his mind. No time like now. He might have whispered the words aloud, or maybe they just echoed through his thoughts. Either way, the kitchen was empty, no one to hear. He grabbed his truck keys. It wouldn't take much. The barrier would crumble, and the drop was plenty. It would look like a tragic accident. Nothing suspicious. Everything tidy. But just as his fingers touched the doorknob, something made him hesitate. Wait. 2 drinks. Would that register in a toxicology report? Could it compromise the insurance claim? Not worth the gamble. He turned around, staggered to the bathroom, and vomited. After rinsing out his mouth and washing the glass he'd used, Ryan placed it back where it belonged. 10 minutes later, he sat behind the wheel, engine running, eyes trained on that deadly curve, forcing himself to take the final step. At that very instant, Sophie, on an impulsive whim, decided to cut through the old road. A shortcut she almost never used. It shaved off a few minutes, maybe 5. As she entered the curve, she spotted Ryan's truck parked ahead. What the hell is he doing here? She thought. This wasn't anywhere near her mother's house. As she honked, Ryan's truck began to edge forward. He didn't seem to see her. His foot left the brake, pressed lightly on the gas. The truck inched toward the edge. Then the honk finally registered. His mind snapped to attention. His vision sharpened. He recognized her car. He hit the brakes. Sophie? Why was she here? He looked out the open window and saw her pulling up, her expression full of alarm. "Ryan!" she shouted. "What are you doing out here?" He didn't answer. He looked stunned, like someone emerging from anesthesia, just staring. "Where's Ava?" she asked, her voice climbing with panic. Fear shot through her. She leapt from her car, ran to the truck, and yanked the door open. Ryan remained motionless, his eyes vacant, unfocused. He stared at her face, her dress. She was still so beautiful, even now. She saw the truth in his silence. "Ryan," she said, voice steady but firm. "Come on, let's go home. We need to talk." She didn't wait for a reply. She walked back to her car and got in. Ryan stayed frozen for a few more seconds, then shifted into reverse, turned slowly, and followed her. At home, Sophie headed straight for the bedroom to change. About 5 minutes later, she walked into the kitchen, where Ryan sat, unmoving, eyes fixed on a cup of coffee. She picked up her phone and called her mother. "Can Ava stay with you tonight?" she asked quickly. Then she sat across from Ryan, unable to meet his gaze. But before she could speak, he broke the silence. "You looked beautiful tonight," he said. "I haven't seen that dress since you were pregnant with Ava. I'm guessing that wasn't book club." His voice was calm, too calm. Was it a date? There was no more space for lies. "Yes," she breathed. "It was. I'm sorry." Tears ran freely down her cheeks. Ryan didn't flinch. Her sobbing didn't stir him. He wasn't angry, just hollowed out in a way that chilled her more than shouting ever could. "Are you leaving me?" he asked. The question was soft, but carried an awful weight. Something inside her cracked open. "No," she said, shaking. "God, no. I don't want to leave. I want to stay. I want to fix this." Her voice was breaking. "I know I messed up. I know how rough things have been. But I want to make it right. I swear, nothing happened. It never got physical. I didn't cross that line." "Someone else meant something to you, didn't they?" Ryan's tone was quiet, but edged with pain. Sophie lowered her head and gave a slow, sorrowful nod. "Yes," she admitted. "I did, and I hate that it's true." Her cheeks burned with shame. "I carry the guilt every day," she murmured. "I need the truth, all of it," Ryan said, more firmly now. "I want to know who it was, how it started, and what exactly happened. Only then can I decide if there's anything left between us to hold on to." Sophie didn't hold back. No evasions, no sugarcoating. She told him everything. She explained how it began, what attracted her to that other person, the poor choices she made, and ultimately, why she walked away. Ryan listened in silence, absorbing each word. When her story came to an end, tears welled in her eyes again. "I've given you the full story," she said through trembling lips. "Now you have to tell me. What were you doing at that turn in the road?" Ryan dropped his gaze to the floor. After a long pause, he spoke quietly but clearly. That night, he had planned to end his life. The words hit her like a wave. She rushed to him, throwing her arms around his body, pressing her face to his chest as her sobs overtook her. "Please, Ryan," she cried. "I still love you. I want to try again." Not just as lovers, but as partners, as true friends. I can't imagine life without you. Something broke open inside Ryan in that moment. The future they once dreamed of suddenly felt possible again, but a daunting question loomed in his mind. How do we even begin to repair this? Sophie wiped her eyes and steadied her voice. Step 1 is letting go of pride. Ending your life isn't courage, and what I did wasn't love. We both lost our way. But if we keep pretending our pride is worth more than each other, we'll lose everything. Ryan nodded slowly. Okay, then what comes next? Who can help us get through this? He watched as she hesitated at the mention of the hotel, but she didn't deny what she'd done. She took a breath and said, My mom. She offered to help a while ago and we said no, just to save face. But since Grandpa died, she has some money from those CDs. She said she'd loan it to us at the same 3% the bank gives her. No need to repay the principal until we're on our feet. We could pay down the worst of the debt and start therapy. We can't make it alone, Ryan. We need support. Ryan didn't respond right away. That night passed without another word between them. In the following days, they talked it out, turning over every option. Eventually, they reached a hard but necessary conclusion. If they wanted a real shot at healing, they needed professional help. Ryan struggled with the betrayal. Even if Sophie hadn't crossed a physical line, she had given her heart to someone else, and that haunted him. Sophie carried her own fear. Could she trust a man who'd once stood on the edge of giving up? When life got hard again, would he stay for her and for Ava? That question never fully left her. On Friday, Sophie went back to teaching. By third period planning, everything erupted. Kevin stormed into her classroom, his face flushed with anger. He didn't notice the two students quietly decorating a bulletin board in the back corner. "Where the hell were you last night?" he shouted. "I waited like an idiot. I even paid for the damn hotel." The girls froze, eyes wide, then bolted from the room. If Kevin had paused to think, he might have realized the damage. But he didn't. He just kept yelling, disregarding all sense of place or propriety. Moments later, the assistant principal appeared, voice like steel. "Miss Whitman, Mr. Trask, my office, now." Words spread like fire across the school. Each retelling twisted the truth a little more, but one thing remained clear. None of it made Kevin look good. That same afternoon, Daphne Monroe saw her chance. She exposed Kevin anonymously. Turns out Kevin had never been some elite soldier. Sure, he served, but only behind a desk stateside. No battle stories, no heroics, no medals. When the truth came out, the backlash was swift and brutal. Nothing fuels public fury like a fake hero. Whatever sympathy Kevin had earned disappeared overnight. Between his classroom outburst and the lies about his military past, he was terminated immediately. No union protection, no second chances. Sophie, meanwhile, was handed a formal reprimand. Technically, she hadn't broken any rules. To stop the spiral from growing worse, her mother came through with the loan. They used it to eliminate much of their debt and begin marriage counseling. Piece by piece, they began rebuilding. The turning point came months later during a visit to Sophie's parents' house. While most of the family chatted in the kitchen, Sophie and her father, a retired colonel, spoke quietly in his study. Suddenly, her voice rang through the house, fierce and unflinching. "Dad, don't blame Ryan. It wasn't his fault. The economy crashed. Ava was born early. He supported my choice to quit my job and return to school without a moment's hesitation. Even though he can't stand his own job, he works more than 50 hours each week to keep our lives running smoothly. He's been nothing but loyal as a husband and remarkable as a father throughout it all. And if you can't find it in yourself to respect that, then I honestly feel sorry for you. Say one more hurtful thing about him, and you won't see me or your granddaughter again." Before anyone could reply, she turned on her heel, gently took Ava from her mother's arms, and glanced at Ryan with firm resolve. "We're leaving. I won't sit through another minute of this." She shot a quick apology at her mom, buckled Ava into her car seat, and backed out of the driveway. Ryan leaned down, gave his mother-in-law a kiss on the cheek, and followed Sophie outside, a victorious grin spreading across his face. That moment marked the first time Sophie had openly defended him in front of her father, and it hit him deep. It was empowering. Something in him shifted. His confidence, bruised for so long, began to return. He could see a future again, one worth believing in. Spurred on by Sophie's unwavering support, Ryan started exploring new job prospects. Within 3 months, he landed a role as director of corporate sales at a flourishing credit union. The position came with a strong salary and regular bonuses. For the first time since his layoff, he was pulling in more than he had before. 2 years had passed since that defining night in Krivaya. Through disciplined saving and sheer perseverance, they had managed to pay back more than half of what they owed Sophie's mom. They also committed to an entire year of couples therapy, which helped slowly mend their marriage. Trust was being rebuilt, tenderness rekindled, and the feeling of being true partners was returning. Sophie no longer flinched when Ryan took Ava out for the day, and Ryan no longer felt anxious when Sophie came home late from book club. One evening, Ryan stepped through the door to the rich scent of his favorite meal wafting from the kitchen. Ava was spending the night with her grandparents. These days, the Colonel mostly kept his judgments to himself, largely thanks to a stern warning from his wife. "Don't even think about pushing away our granddaughter," she had snapped. He hadn't crossed that line again. Sophie gestured to the table, her eyes alight with excitement. "Ryan, sit. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I've made up my mind about 2 things. I want a second honeymoon, and I want another baby." Ryan blinked, caught completely off guard. "Can we afford that?" he asked cautiously. She smiled. He hadn't said no, and that was already something. "I did some digging. 6 nights in Jamaica, all-inclusive, under $2,000. And Ava? Mom already offered to take her." A grin stretched across Ryan's face. The idea of spending 6 uninterrupted days with Sophie, no jobs, no toddler meltdowns, no distractions, sounded like paradise. It had been more than 4 years since they'd spent even one night alone together. "Book it," he said, "unless you already did." Sophie hesitated for a second, then continued, "About the second baby, we always said we wanted 2. I was terrified after what happened with Ava, but I spoke with my OB. She said the risk of another premature birth is under 5%, pretty standard, and our new insurance plan is excellent. Even if complications happen, we'd be covered." Ryan considered her words. "Can I say yes to the trip now and think about the baby part a little longer?" "Of course," she said, glowing with happiness. 4 weeks later, they were standing barefoot on a Jamaican beach, returning to where it had all begun. Mid-flight, Ryan had reached over and taken Sophie's hand. "Maybe we should forget the diaphragm this time," he teased with a wink. She didn't reply with words, just leaned over, kissed him, and gave his hand a firm squeeze. Ryan had always wondered whether anything could surpass their honeymoon. That question was answered 5 minutes after their feet touched the sand. Before they even reached the lounge chairs, Sophie unclasped her top and let it fall. That night, she emerged in a sundress so dazzling it probably violated modesty laws back home. On their 3rd morning, just as dawn was breaking, she nudged Ryan awake and pulled him toward a quiet stretch of beach, far from the resort crowds. Before he could even ask why, she wriggled out of her bikini and plunged into the ocean. Ryan, stunned and elated, stripped down and followed her. As they drifted in the calm water, Ryan asked, "How'd you discover this place?" "Justine, the woman I met at dinner last night. She and her husband come here all the time. Apparently, mornings are the best." "Are we even allowed to be out here like this?" "She said as long as you're dressed by 9, no one says a word. But she did warn me, keep your eye on your stuff. Some kids once stole a couple swimsuits while they were in the water." That gave Ryan pause. Let's not stray too far from the shore, just in case." Sophie laughed and floated backward, making her way slowly toward the beach. Ryan followed behind, perfectly happy just to watch her. When he caught up, he whispered, "Should we be gone before your friend shows up?" "Exactly why I dragged you out here at the crack of dawn," she said with a wink. For the next half hour they swam, laughed, and kissed like teenagers breaking rules for the thrill of it. By 8:30 they were dressed again and jogging back to the resort, hearts light and spirits high. Back in their bedroom, they tidied up, dried themselves off, and slipped beneath the covers once again. That morning might well have been the moment their second child was conceived, a boy they would later name Ryan Jr. 8 months after that trip, Sophie sat at her desk, organizing papers as the school day loomed, when someone appeared in the doorway. She glanced up and went still. Was it really Alexa Morales? "Good morning, Mrs. Whitman. Mind if I come in?" "Of course," she replied warmly. "What brings you here?" "I'll be around for the next few months," Alexa said. "I'm student teaching chemistry with Mr. Baxter." Sophie stood, her arms reaching to hug her former student, though the embrace was awkward, her pregnant belly pushed between them. "That's wonderful news," she said. "Mr. Baxter is a great teacher. You'll get a lot out of working with him. And if you ever need anything, I'm just a few doors down. At least until this baby decides to make his entrance." Alexa laughed. "Honestly, Mrs. Whitman, you look like you could go into labor any second." Sophie joined in the laughter. "That's what everyone keeps saying. We feel incredibly lucky." But silently, in a place she shared with no one, Sophie was thinking about how truly blessed she was. That day when Alexa had forgotten her ethics textbook and returned to retrieve it, such a seemingly trivial event had redirected the entire arc of her life. As the bell rang and Alexa turned to leave, they exchanged another hug. "Thank you, Alexa," Sophie whispered, so quietly it was only for herself. Years later, on the eve of Ava's wedding, Sophie invited her daughter to sit with her for a conversation that had long waited to be had. She told her everything, about the moment she nearly gave in to temptation, about the financial pressures and emotional emptiness that had led her to the edge. She didn't hold back as she described how close she'd come to making a catastrophic decision, and how that near miss pushed her to fight for what she had. Sophie spoke honestly about how hard it had been to rebuild the trust she'd nearly destroyed, and how deeply grateful she was that Ryan had chosen forgiveness, had chosen to stay. By the end of it, the two women were holding each other tightly, eyes red with tears, bathed in the soft glow of the room. The next morning, just hours before the ceremony, Ava sought out her father. "Dad," she said quietly, "Mom told me everything. I think she wanted to make sure I don't repeat her mistakes. But there's something she couldn't quite explain. Why you stayed." Ryan didn't look surprised. Sophie had always believed in turning personal pain into lessons, even if it meant baring her soul. "Well," he said gently, "it would have been a lot tougher to forgive if she'd actually crossed the line. But she didn't. And she didn't just apologize. She owned up to all the choices that led her there." He paused, looking Ava in the eyes. "I spent a long time picturing what my life would have been like without her. Without you. And all I saw was loneliness. Misery. But instead," he added, "I got 20 years of joy. More than I probably deserve considering how close I came to blowing everything." "What do you mean?" Ava asked softly. Ryan smiled, a quiet and distant smile. "That's a story for another day. Today's about you, your future, not my mistakes. But I promise, one day, we'll share a drink, and I'll tell you why your mom is the best thing that ever happened to me." Ava didn't press further, though she wasn't entirely satisfied. Inside, she made herself a promise. Someday, she would sit her father down and ask him to tell it all. What she couldn't know was that Ryan still carried a truth he had never shared with anyone. Just days after Sophie had confessed everything, he'd driven to Kevin Trask's apartment, consumed by fury, prepared to beat the man to a pulp. He kicked the door in, only to find the place deserted. Trask had disappeared without a trace. Oddly, that absence made it easier to let go of the rage, and to begin the long process of healing. Our first tale concludes here, but don't go just yet. Another gripping story is about to unfold. Ready to dive in? At just 10 years old, Ted experienced the devastating loss of both his parents. From then on, it was his uncle who stepped in to raise him. In high school, he met Jessica, and they quickly formed an inseparable bond, rarely seen without each other. After finishing school, Ted pursued a mechanical technician program at a trade school, while Jessica enrolled at a university to study business administration. The day she graduated, Ted proposed, dropping to one knee without hesitation. Jessica immediately accepted, her answer certain and heartfelt. By that point, Ted had already begun working in the manufacturing industry. That evening, to celebrate her graduation and their engagement, he took Jessica out for dinner. As she slowly twirled her wine glass, she looked at him and said softly, "You've always been the one for me, Ted. I want to share your life, take your name, and grow old by your side. But I can see something's bothering you. Please tell me what it is." Ted smiled gently and held her hand. "You know me too well," he said. "It's just that we might need to push the wedding back, maybe for several years, 4 or 5 even." Jessica's brows furrowed. "Why would we do that?" she asked, confused. "I've been thinking about continuing my studies," she admitted. "A bachelor's degree isn't the finish line for me. I'm still young, and I want to aim higher." "If that's what your heart's set on, the sooner you start, the better," Ted replied with quiet conviction. "Your drive is one of the things I admire most about you. If further education is what you want, you have my full support. You always have." Her face lit up with gratitude. "I knew you'd understand," she whispered, leaning forward to kiss him. "Want to know what I want to study next?" Ted gave an eager nod. "Of course. Tell me." "I want to go into law. I'm going to become a lawyer." He looked at her with complete confidence. "You'll be brilliant at it," he said, without a shred of doubt. Raising his glass, he offered a toast. "It won't be easy. Long nights, endless studying. But I believe in you. I'll be there through all of it." Jessica's eyes glistened. "Thank you, Ted. I couldn't do it without you." "I love you," she said after a pause. "But law school won't come cheap. I've already got loans from undergrad, and I'll need to work while studying to cover the costs." Ted nodded. "That's a lot on your plate," he said thoughtfully. Reaching out, he cupped her cheek. "But I've got an idea." She tilted her head. "What kind of idea?" "Let's get married now," he said, clasping both her hands. "I'll take care of the expenses. You won't have to juggle work. I'll handle everything and give you space to focus. I won't be a distraction, I promise. You know I'm in it for the long haul." Jessica hesitated, concern in her voice. "That's such a heavy burden, Ted. You'll be doing everything. What if you start to feel neglected? I couldn't bear that." "I'll never feel that way," Ted said, his voice resolute. He paused, then added more softly, "I could never grow tired of loving you." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," she whispered. 2 months after her acceptance into law school, the two were married in a small, heartfelt ceremony with only their closest loved ones in attendance. Ted rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment near Columbia Law School, and with the help of friends and family, furnished it with second-hand finds. His old pickup proved essential during the move. They transformed the second bedroom into a quiet study space, complete with a small couch where Jessica could take short naps. Ted also surprised her with a bicycle to help her get around without spending much. During snowy winters, she relied on the bus. To help make ends meet, Ted took on an additional job, working nights at a gas station. Each day began early for him. After finishing his main job, he'd come home to an empty apartment, Jessica often at the library or in class. He cooked dinner and left it ready before heading to the gas station for his night shift, which lasted until 11 p.m. The 30-minute drive home left him exhausted. Sometimes Jessica would be asleep. Other times, he'd find her still at her desk, buried in legal texts. Most nights, he ate alone, then collapsed into bed. Weekends became their only real time together, unless Jessica had deadlines or group meetings. By her second year, she'd begun a part-time internship under supervising attorneys and regularly attended legal seminars. Choosing criminal law as her focus, she often observed police interrogations from behind one-way mirrors. During school breaks, she worked at Sullivan and Gumbold, a respected law firm. As time passed, their shared moments became more fleeting, yet both held fast to the belief that these sacrifices were paving the way for the life they envisioned. Ted remained steadfast, always encouraging, never interfering. After passing the bar exam, Jessica was offered a junior associate position at Sullivan and Gumbold, the firm where she had already begun making her mark. To commemorate the occasion, the couple spent a week vacationing in Florida. It was the happiest they'd been together since their wedding. While there, Ted gave Jess a silver bracelet featuring a delicate charm in the shape of a J. After they returned home, Jess encouraged Ted to leave his second job, and shortly after, he was promoted to supervisor. Still, working at the law firm didn't turn out to be what either of them had imagined. Jess found herself buried in work. When she wasn't burning the midnight oil at the office, she hauled piles of case files home. It reminded Ted of her days in law school. Dinners would end, and she'd vanish into the study until well past midnight. Their weekends, however, remained tender and affectionate. After another year passed, they decided it was time to relocate. Buying a house in the suburbs came surprisingly easily. They locked in a mortgage with little resistance. On their first evening in the new house, while they shared dinner, Ted gently brought up the subject of starting a family. "I know how much this means to both of us," he said. "Maybe now's the right time?" Jess gave him a soft look and replied, "Not quite yet." He blinked in surprise. "Why not?" "I want to make partner," she said. "I've already spoken to William Sullivan." Her gaze didn't waver, watching closely for his reaction. Ted turned his eyes to the wall, silent and reflective. He sipped his wine, offering no reply. Jess continued, "To get there, I need to go back for my LLM." "More school?" Ted asked, his fingers absent-mindedly brushing over the bracelet charm. "Yes. It means I'll be balancing work and classes. The firm's covering tuition, but I'll be locked into a 10-year commitment." Ted gave a slow nod. "If this is what you really want, then I'm with you." Though the words came easily, there was a faint ache behind them. Jess rose from her chair and wrapped her arms around him. "I knew you'd get it. I love you, Ted. Once this is behind us, we'll start our family. I promise. I want you to be proud to be a dad." They kissed, and Ted carried her to their bedroom, where they made love for the first time in their new home. 2 months later, Jess began her LLM studies. From that point on, a distance began to form between them. She returned home late or stayed sequestered in the study, sometimes sleeping on the couch instead of in bed. Weekends, once filled with shared moments, were now dominated by textbooks and long stints at the library. Their conversations thinned, and days passed with barely more than a few exchanged words. Physical closeness faded, replaced by hurried gestures and rare intimacy. Ted often cooked for one, while Jess either picked up quick meals or fixed something small for herself. Still, he stayed steady, quietly enduring, as he always had. On their wedding anniversary, with Jess still at work, Ted decided to surprise her. He brought along Chinese takeout and made his way to her office, hoping they could share even a sliver of time on their special day. As he approached the building, A man dressed in a white shirt and black slacks walked briskly ahead, chatting on his phone with energy. The automatic doors opened, and the man entered. Ted followed close behind. At the elevator, the man was still on the call. "Yesterday was too rushed," he said, smiling. "Today we've got 45 whole minutes. Let's enjoy every second." Ted gave a small laugh under his breath. Someone's clearly planning a romantic encounter, he thought. "I'll meet you in your office. Let's not waste a minute," the man added. When the elevator doors opened, both men stepped inside. The stranger immediately pressed the button for the 10th floor. Ted stood at the back, heading there too. "I'm in the elevator now," the man said, grinning. "I'll be at your door in a few seconds." Ted's stomach tightened. Only 2 offices were on the 10th floor, Sullivan and Gumbold to the right, a marketing agency to the left. As the doors slid apart, the man strode confidently to the right. Ted froze, unable to move. As the elevator door began to close again, he stopped it and stepped out, veering left and crouching as if tying his shoe. From his lowered position, he peered down the hallway. The man knocked. The door opened. A woman's hand, wearing a silver bracelet with a J charm, reached out, took hold of his shirt, and pulled him inside. The door shut. Ted sank to the floor, his back against the wall, tears silently carving paths down his cheeks. He cried. The bracelet was unmistakable. That tiny charm unraveled everything. His thoughts unraveled with it. His life, his marriage, the years of sacrifices. Where had he failed? What had the other man given Jess that he hadn't? Had he never been enough? Eventually, he rose, picked up the food bag, and made his way back to the elevator. Elsewhere, Jess sat alone in her parked car outside a Starbucks. Guilt gnawed at her as she stared at her reflection in the window. Her voice broke the silence. What did I do? Why did I betray Ted? He was the kind of man most women pray for but rarely find. Resting her forehead against the steering wheel, she let her tears spill without restraint. Her thoughts kept circling back to the night before. Dinner at the little bistro near her office. The distance between her and Ted had grown, both in touch and in spirit, and the quiet ache of solitude had taken hold. That night, a fleeting glance from the waiter unraveled her restraint, and in a moment of weakness, she made a choice she couldn't take back. She brought him to her office. His time was short, and so was what happened between them. They shared a brief, reckless moment before he left, his number tucked into her coat pocket. It was a slip, a desperate attempt to feel something again, or at least that's how she rationalized it. Her thoughts kept returning to him all day, so when Ted called to see if she'd be home early, she lied, told him work would keep her late. She heard the disappointment in his silence. That night, unable to face him, she took a blanket and retreated to the study sofa. By morning, he was gone, though not without leaving breakfast for her on the counter. Then came her second betrayal. She called the man again and invited him over. The moment he arrived, she dragged him inside, lips already searching, judgment drowned out by desire. Jess gave in again, letting go of everything but the heat of the moment. "Don't forget today, baby," he murmured into her ear. "Tonight, I'll make you moan. Burn this date into your memory." The spell shattered. Her eyes snapped open. Reality came crashing back. She shoved him off and scrambled to get dressed. "What's going on, babe?" he asked, puzzled. "You have to leave," Jess replied, urgency in her tone. "I completely forgot. I have dinner with my husband." She darted to her desk, grabbed her phone, and started dialing. Still pulling on clothes, she snapped, "You got what you came for. I'll reach out if I want more. Now go." He started to protest, but she was already at the door, phone to her ear. He rolled his eyes, gave a dismissive shrug, and walked out. She pressed a finger to her lips, signaling silence. "I'll call you," he said on his way out. She nodded and closed the door behind him. "Pick up, Ted," she whispered as the call rang unanswered. Straight to voicemail. Swallowing her panic, she left a message. I'm so sorry, Ted. I can't believe I forgot. Today's our anniversary. I'm on my way home. Let's go out tonight, okay? Please wait for me. I love you. She dried her face, started the car, and scolded herself the entire drive home. When she pulled into the garage and saw that Ted's van wasn't there, she felt a flicker of relief. He's not home yet, she thought. I can shower, wash this day off me. She stepped inside, focused. I'll be the woman he deserves. I won't let my urges destroy what we have. I'll give him the child he's longed for. If that means dropping my LLM, so be it. No more overtime, no more excuses. I'll be the mother he dreams of. I'll face what I've done and find help. I'll become whole for him. I love him. I won't fail him again. He'll have all of me. I'll stop the pill. That will be my gift today. She made her way to the bathroom, stripped off her clothes, and stepped into the steaming water. Later, while drying her hair, something didn't feel right. She glanced around. Ted's razor, his toothbrush, gone. She checked drawers, cabinets, empty. Panic rising, she rushed to the bedroom. His side of the closet was bare. Her stomach dropped. No, she breathed. She raced downstairs. On the kitchen counter sat a folded note, and beside it, his wedding ring. Ted, please, she said, her voice cracking. Her hands trembled as she picked up the note. Happy anniversary. Next time, bring your boyfriend here. Our bed is comfier than your office desk. She didn't finish reading. Her knees buckled, and the world went black. Hours later, wrapped in shadows, Jess regained consciousness. Reaching for her phone, she called again. No answer. Voicemail. Her voice trembled with sorrow. Please come home, Ted. I made a mistake. Let's talk. I still love you. Only you. She didn't sleep. She cried until dawn. In the morning, she called her supervisor, William Sullivan, to request time off. Her voice betrayed her. He didn't press, but gave her a day, asking they talk soon. Then she called Ted's office. The response chilled her. Ted had already called in. He'd taken vacation. Jess had spent the entire day unsuccessfully trying to get in touch with Ted, leaving voicemail after voicemail with no reply. When she arrived at work, she went straight to Sullivan's assistant and requested an urgent meeting. The moment she stepped into his office, she launched into her story without pause. By the time she finished, her face was streaked with tears. I'm willing to let this incident slide, even though it technically violates our policies, Sullivan said softly. Meeting her eyes with calm intensity, he added, You're one of the brightest attorneys we have, sharp, focused, and full of potential. That's why we invested in you. We believe in your future here. You made a serious misstep, and yes, there are consequences. But this firm believes in redemption. Still, if you aim to make partner, your reputation has to be spotless. Clients don't entrust their cases to someone who's breached that trust. I hope you see the weight of that. Now, tell me about your husband. Jess gave a slight shake of her head. I don't know where he is. He's not answering, and it seems like he's shut off his phone. I have no idea how he even found out. I can't lose him, she added in a fragile voice, cracking under the weight of her guilt. I made a terrible choice. Tears welled up again and fell freely. Crying isn't going to fix this, Sullivan said, not unkindly but with firmness. Don't isolate yourself. Show up. Keep moving. Sitting at home will only make things worse. He hesitated, then offered, I've got a cousin in the department. I'll have him check around, local motels and such, just in case he's nearby. Thank you, Jess whispered, quietly blotting her tears with a tissue. 2 days later, a young man arrived at the firm's front desk, asking for Mrs. Wilson. The receptionist explained that Jess was currently in a client meeting and wouldn't be free for a couple of hours. He could wait or leave a message. It's about Mr. Wilson, the man replied. That caught her attention immediately, and she called Sullivan. Moments later, He and Jess hurried into the reception area. "Are you Jessica Wilson?" the man asked. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "What's happened to my husband?" "I'm here to serve you," he said, handing her a thick manila envelope. "Also, there's a restraining order." Without another word, he turned and walked out. Jess's knees buckled, and Sullivan rushed to steady her, guiding her to a chair. He signaled for the receptionist to bring some water. Back in his office, Sullivan sat with the documents spread before him, scanning each page carefully. "He's citing infidelity as the reason for filing," he said, his voice low. "He's not asking for anything from your shared assets. Didn't take anything from the home. Only withdrew what he needed to cover legal expenses. No claim for support. He just wants to leave it all behind." Jess struggled to hold back another wave of sobs. "Do you think he has proof?" "I don't know," Sullivan replied, turning his laptop toward her. "But take a look at this." He played the building's surveillance footage from the 2 nights in question. "Watch this," he said, pointing at the screen. Ted appeared, carrying a plastic takeout bag marked with Chinese characters. He trailed behind a waiter who was engrossed in a phone call, casually letting Ted in. The video showed the two waiting for the elevator. Ted appeared distraught, listening silently as the waiter continued talking. The footage then followed them down the hall. Ted stopped at the office door, crouched down, and remained there. When the waiter went inside, Ted stayed outside. Then, unable to hold back his emotions, he slumped and began to weep. "He must have been shattered," Sullivan said, quietly closing the laptop. "He brought me dinner," Jess whispered, breaking down. "It was our anniversary." Sullivan spoke with care. "What do you want to do now?" "I want to talk to him. I want him back. I need to apologize, beg for his forgiveness. Anything, whatever it takes to make it right. But he won't see me." "Maybe I could speak to him through his attorney?" she asked, eyes pleading. "We'll represent you," Sullivan said without hesitation. "I'll take the case personally." "Thank you," Jess murmured, her voice barely audible. "The lawyer he hired is Derek Wong, fresh out of law school. Probably went with a low-cost option," Sullivan said. Jess's eyes dimmed slightly at the mention. "We'll handle it. He'll get an education from this case," he added with a touch of grit. "I'm going to try to get Judge O'Hara assigned," he went on. Jess looked surprised. "You think that's possible?" "I've got some influence. O'Hara never approves fast-track divorces. He's devout, insists on full counseling before even considering a final decree. I'll push for the maximum sessions. That'll give you time. Time to reconnect with Ted, to say what you need to say." "Do you think we can convince Derek Wong to set up a meeting with Ted before that?" Jess asked urgently. "I just need to see him." Sullivan picked up the card attached to the divorce papers and dialed the number. "Good morning. This is William Sullivan of Sullivan and Gumbold. May I speak with Mr. Derek Wong, please?" As the phone rang, he glanced up and gave Jess a reassuring wink. "Good afternoon, Mr. Wong. Our firm is representing Mrs. Jessica Wilson in the case of Wilson versus Wilson," the attorney began professionally. "She's hoping to arrange an in-person meeting with Mr. Wilson at your office." Mr. Wong remained silent on the other end. "Understood, Mr. Wong. Thank you for your time," the lawyer concluded. "My client plans to fight this divorce aggressively. We'll see you in court. Take care." He ended the call without another word. "What did he say?" Jess asked, tension etched in every feature. The lawyer gave her a solemn look. "Your husband has already declined any in-person meeting through his counsel." "Did my cousin manage to track down where Ted is staying?" she asked, clinging to a shred of hope. "He's not checked into any hotel," the lawyer explained. "Your cousin's been discreetly asking around. He suspects Ted might be staying with a work associate. But Jessica, I have to warn you, don't try to reach out. He's filed a restraining order. One rash move could damage your case even more." Jess gave a faint nod, her eyes brimming with pain. The days that followed were emotionally agonizing for her. The absence of Ted left a heavy void in her life. Night after night, she returned to an empty home, wrapping herself around his pillow, desperate for the warmth of his presence. She quietly hoped the judge would direct them toward counseling rather than granting a divorce outright. Jess began preparing for court with careful precision. She practiced her statements, choosing each word with thought. She moderated her tone. Most importantly, she made the firm decision to take responsibility for her actions. 3 months later, the trial began. The courtroom was filled with all parties. Judge O'Hara sat at the bench. Jess was seated beside 2 legal colleagues, one of whom was William. Across the aisle sat Ted with a young attorney at his side. Not once did he look in her direction, while she couldn't take her eyes off him. Every part of her wanted to run to him, to hold him, to kiss him, to say she still loved him. But the proceedings began. Ted sat quietly as the court prepared to determine the fate of their marriage. After listening to both sides, Judge O'Hara ordered 20 counseling sessions and said he would base his final ruling on the therapist's evaluation. Jess and her team breathed a collective sigh of relief. Then Derek Wong stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, before we conclude today, my client has a statement to make." The room fell into complete silence. All eyes turned toward Ted. "You may proceed, Mr. Wilson," the judge said, "but keep it brief." Ted rose, his face unreadable, and directed his words toward the bench. "I've come to a decision. I no longer wish to end my marriage. I want to stay married." The judge gave an approving nod. "A commendable decision. You both have work to do, but it's good to see a willingness to repair what's broken." With that, he surveyed the room once more. "This matter is resolved." He brought the gavel down with finality. Jess shot to her feet, joy flooding her face as she moved toward Ted. For the first time that day, he looked at her, his expression cold and hard. He raised his hand to stop her mid-step. "Your Honor," he said once again. "There is no case anymore, Mr. Wilson," the judge said, mildly irritated. "Take your wife home and start over. Any further questions can go through your lawyer." Ted's voice was ice. "I have 2 quick legal inquiries. First, is there any statute, federal or state, that mandates I live in the same residence as my cheating wife? And second, can I be penalized for denying her physical intimacy?" The judge's tone sharpened. "Marriage does involve cohabitation and intimacy, but no law compels you to share a home or engage physically if you choose not to." Jess collapsed into the nearest chair, overcome with emotion. William leaned in gently, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He can walk away anytime he wants. There's nothing legally binding him. You don't share kids and your income surpasses his. He owes you nothing." Derek Wong gave a sardonic smirk. "He's thinking about either Alaska or somewhere deep in the South." Ted suddenly snapped, raising his voice, then stormed out of the room. Jess scrambled after him. She caught up to him in the corridor and grabbed his arm. He shook her off without a word and kept going. "Ted, please," she cried. "Don't leave like this. I made a terrible mistake. Just one, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I love you. No one else. Please, just give us a second chance." He marched on, silent and unmoved, but she wouldn't give up. "We can fix this," she said, her voice desperate. "You're only this angry because you still care. If you didn't, you wouldn't be hurting this much. It was one stupid lapse. Please forgive me. Come back. I'll walk away from my career if that's what it takes," she offered. "We can carve out more time for each other. We can start a family. I'll be the wife you deserve, I promise." He spun around, eyes blazing with fury. "A promise?" he hissed. "You already made one, at the altar. Now here's another. And after this, there'll be one more, then another, and another after that." "I can't believe I ever put my trust in you, Jessica." Ted's voice rang out, raw with emotion. "Am I angry? No doubt. But the anger isn't aimed at you, it's directed at myself. I'm the idiot who allowed this to happen. I should have never let myself love you." "Don't say that," Jess murmured, her voice breaking as she reached for his face with shaking hands. He pulled away, his expression a mix of hurt and fury. "I never should have proposed to you. The moment you said you wanted to pursue law, that should have been my wake-up call to leave and never look back." Jess dropped to her knees, clinging to his legs as if they were the only thing keeping her grounded. "Ted, I'm begging you," she cried. "Please don't let it end like this." "You made a fool of me," he shot back. "Ever since, I've been tearing myself apart, trying to understand what I did. What pushed you towards someone else?" "This isn't on you," Jess sobbed. "It was my mistake, all of it. But if there's still a piece of your heart that belongs to me, I'm asking you to forgive me, to come back." Ted knelt, his eyes locking onto hers. "If you really love me," he said quietly, "then let me go." With effort, he pulled free from her grasp, turned away, and walked out, leaving Jess crumpled on the floor, her tears soaking the silence. Outside, he moved toward his van, the night air brushing against him. "Alaska, or the South," he muttered. "Guess I'll let the coin decide." Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.